The massive crystal dome of Nexus Prime stretched high above the gathered representatives, its transparent walls showing the endless stars beyond. 847 different species filled the circular chamber, their voices creating a symphony of languages that the translation devices worked overtime to process. Some delegates floated in specialized atmosphere bubbles, others stood on multiple legs, and a few existed as pure energy contained within metal suits. At the center of it all sat an empty chair. The chair was beautiful, carved from dark wood that seemed to absorb the light around it. Gold and silver designs decorated its high back, showing symbols of a blue and green world that most delegates had never seen. The seat cushion was deep blue, the color of Earth's oceans, though few in the chamber would recognize that fact. Ambassador Marcus Thorne adjusted his scaled skin as he prepared to speak. His species, the Zephyrians, had been part of the Galactic Council for over 2 centuries, long enough to remember when that chair was first placed in the chamber. He stood at his speaking platform, his yellow eyes scanning the crowd. "Fellow representatives," Marcus began, his voice carrying the slight hiss that marked his reptilian heritage, "I bring before you today a matter we have ignored for too long. That chair." He pointed one clawed finger toward the center of the room. "For 300 years, it has sat empty. 3 centuries of wasted space, wasted hope, and wasted resources." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The empty chair had become such a familiar sight that many had stopped noticing it entirely. "The species called humans," Marcus continued, "have shown no interest in joining our great civilization. We have sent thousands of messages to their world. We have placed communication beacons at the edge of their solar system. We have even sent unmanned probes with gifts and peaceful greetings. All ignored. All unanswered." A delegate from the Crystalline Viridian Collective chimed in, her voice like wind through glass caves. "Perhaps they are not yet advanced enough to detect our communications." "Then why keep the chair?" Marcus shot back. "Our intelligence shows they still fight wars among themselves. They poison their own world. They have barely managed to put simple machines on their moon. These are not the actions of a species ready for galactic citizenship." The debate that followed was heated but not new. Similar arguments had taken place dozens of times over the centuries. Some species believed Earth should be contacted more directly. Others wanted to leave the humans alone until they developed naturally. A few suggested that the empty chair was bad luck, a reminder of failure in their otherwise successful galactic community. Then, from the highest tier of seating, a voice spoke that made every delegate fall silent. "The chair remains." Helena Blackwood rose slowly from her seat, her ancient hands gripping a walking staff carved from bone. At 412 years old, she was the oldest being in the chamber. Her life extended far beyond normal limits through medical treatments that had been perfected before most species had discovered fire. Helena belonged to the Archive Worlds, a collection of planets dedicated to preserving the history and knowledge of the galaxy. Her people were among the first to achieve space travel after the mysterious progenitors had vanished, leaving behind only ruins and cryptic instructions. "Honored curator," Marcus said, his tone respectful despite his frustration, "surely you cannot expect us to wait forever for a species that may never join us." Helena's footsteps echoed in the silent chamber as she made her way down to the speaking floor. Her movements were slow but steady, each step deliberate. When she reached the center, she placed one weathered hand on the arm of the empty chair. "This chair was placed here by direct order of the progenitors," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness. "The last message they left before their disappearance was very specific. The chair remains until Earth chooses to fill it. Not until we decide they are ready. Not until they meet our standards. Until they choose." "But the progenitors are gone," protested Admiral James Kane from the Stellar Defense Coalition. His human-like appearance often surprised other species, though his people had evolved independently on a world far from Earth. Their civilization vanished thousands of years ago. Surely their ancient rules no longer apply. Helena's eyes, still sharp despite her age, fixed on the Admiral. "The progenitors built this council. They established the laws that govern our interactions. They prevented the great wars that would have destroyed us all. Everything we have, everything we are as a galactic community, exists because they showed us a better way." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "The progenitors knew things we did not. They saw patterns we could not understand. If they said the chair waits for Earth's choice, then perhaps there is a reason we cannot yet see." The chamber remained silent, thousands of beings contemplating the ancient mystery. The progenitors had indeed vanished without explanation, leaving behind only helpful technology and the framework for galactic peace. Their ruined cities could be found on dozens of worlds, always containing gifts that advanced local civilizations by centuries. Marcus Thorne's frustration was clear in his voice. With respect, honored curator, how long must we wait? Another century? Another millennium? At what point do we admit that perhaps the progenitors were wrong? Helena smiled, an expression that transformed her weathered features. The progenitors were never wrong, Ambassador. Not once in all the records we have studied. If they said to wait, then waiting serves a purpose. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from across the galaxy. The chair remains, she repeated firmly, until Earth chooses to fill it. The session ended without a vote, the matter tabled once again. But as delegates filed out of the chamber, many cast curious glances at the empty chair, wondering what secrets it might hold, and why a vanished race had considered one small blue world so important. Dr. Emma Clark pushed her brown hair behind her ear as she stared at the holographic display floating above her desk. The Archive World's deep research facility was quiet at this hour, most scholars having returned to their quarters for sleep. But Emma could not sleep, not when the mystery of Earth kept pulling at her thoughts like a puzzle missing too many pieces. She had been studying the progenitor records for 3 years now, ever since the latest debate about the empty chair had sparked her curiosity. What she found in the ancient files made no sense according to everything the galaxy knew about human civilization. Computer, show me all references to species designation gardeners in the progenitor database, she commanded. The display shifted, showing dozens of encrypted files. Emma's fingers danced across the control panel, her clearance level allowing her access to materials that most researchers never saw. What appeared made her heart race. The files spoke of beings who had planted seeds of consciousness across the void, and nurtured young minds until they could think for themselves. More disturbing were references to the Watchers who sleep in the cradle system, and those who guide from shadows until the children are ready. Emma leaned back in her chair, trying to make sense of what she was reading. The language was poetic, almost religious, which was unusual for progenitor records. They typically wrote in precise scientific terms. 3 sectors away, Captain Robert Hayes was having problems of his own. His merchant ship, the Starbound, had just completed another supply run to the Outer Rim colonies when he received a distress call that made no sense. "This is Pirate Lord Vex commanding the Blood Fleet," the transmission had said. "We have your cargo ships surrounded. Surrender now or face destruction." But when Robert arrived at the coordinates, he found nothing. No pirates. No cargo ships. Not even debris. Just empty space where a battle should have been raging. "Control, this is Captain Hayes," Robert transmitted back to the nearest coalition base. "I'm at the distress coordinates, but there's nothing here. Not even energy signatures from weapon fire." The reply came quickly. "Hayes, you're the 3rd captain to report this kind of thing near the Sol system this month. Pirate fleets gathering for attacks, then just vanishing without trace." Robert checked his navigation display. He was indeed close to the Sol system, though still several light years away from Earth itself. The small yellow star appeared unremarkable on his sensors, showing no signs of advanced technology or defensive systems. "Any idea what's happening to these pirates?" Robert asked. "None. But whatever it is, it's cleaning up the sector better than our patrol fleets ever did." Back on the Archive Worlds, Emma had discovered something that made her hands shake as she read it. Hidden in a file marked with the highest security classification was a star chart showing archaeological sites throughout the galaxy. Each site was marked with a symbol that looked disturbingly familiar. She pulled up images from the sites and enhanced them, focusing on marks found carved into ancient stone. Her breath caught in her throat. They were handprints. Human handprints. But these sites were older than recorded galactic civilization by thousands of years. Emma cross-referenced the dates with everything she knew about human development. According to all intelligence reports, humans had only achieved basic spaceflight within the last century. They were still confined to their own solar system, still struggling with primitive technology. So how could human handprints exist on worlds across the galaxy, carved into stone monuments that predated the oldest known civilizations? "Computer, run a deep analysis on transmission patterns from the Sol system over the past 500 years, Emma ordered. The results appeared instantly, showing a complex web of data that made Emma's scientific training rebel against what she was seeing. Hidden within background radiation and stellar interference were patterns too complex to be natural, too subtle to be noticed without specifically looking for them. Mathematical sequences that wouldn't be discovered by galactic science for centuries were embedded in what appeared to be random radio noise from Earth. Equations for faster-than-light travel were hidden in the timing of pulsar signals from nearby stars. Even more impossible, there were solutions to physics problems that the galaxy's best scientists were still working on. Emma stood up and began pacing around her small office, her mind racing. Either someone was playing an elaborate joke that had been centuries in the making, or everything the galaxy believed about Earth was completely wrong. She decided to check one more thing. Accessing the most restricted files in the archive database, she searched for any mention of Earth in the original progenitor founding documents. What she found made her sit down hard in her chair. The progenitors had not just mentioned Earth in their records. They had designated it as the origin point and home of the first gardeners. More shocking still, the coordinates given for the progenitor home world matched exactly with Earth's location in space. Emma's hands trembled as she read the final entry in the file. When the children have learned to walk in harmony, when war becomes memory and peace becomes truth, then shall the gardeners return to tend the garden they have grown. The chair waits not for strangers but for those who built it. Across the galaxy, strange reports continued to filter in. Ancient structures on dead worlds were activating for brief moments before going dark again. Long-range sensors detected energy signatures near Earth that shouldn't exist for a pre-spaceflight civilization. And merchant captains like Robert Hayes kept finding empty space where pirate fleets had gathered to threaten peaceful ships. Something was watching over the galaxy, something that seemed to care deeply about keeping the peace that the progenitors had established so long ago. And all signs pointed to that something living quietly in the Sol system, waiting patiently for a day that perhaps only they understood. Emma saved her research and encrypted it with the highest security codes available. She had a feeling that she had stumbled onto the greatest discovery in galactic history, one that would change everything the galaxy believed about itself. Emma Clark stood before the massive doors of the progenitor facility, her new security clearance finally granting her access to the deepest level of the archive worlds. The doors were made of some unknown metal that seemed to shift color in the light, and they had remained sealed for over 1,000 years. Only 3 people in the galaxy had clearance to enter, and Emma had spent 6 months convincing them to let her be the 4th. The facility hummed to life as she stepped inside, ancient systems recognizing her presence and illuminating the vast chamber beyond. What Emma saw made her stop breathing for a moment. The room was filled with holographic displays, each one showing different scenes from across the galaxy. But these were not current images. They were historical records, some so old that the stars themselves appeared in different positions. She walked to the central console, her footsteps echoing in the enormous space. The moment she touched the control panel, a hologram appeared in front of her. Emma gasped and stepped backward. The figure in the hologram was human. Completely, unmistakably human. Personal log of Dr. William Foster, Galactic Seeding Project, Standard Year 847, the man said. He looked to be in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. He wore simple clothing, but there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of great authority and responsibility. The Corellian species continues to show remarkable progress, Dr. Foster continued. Their mathematical abilities have developed faster than we projected. Within another 1,000 years, they should discover faster-than-light travel. We have placed the necessary technological hints in their path, disguised as natural phenomena and ancient artifacts. Emma's hands shook as she accessed more files. Record after record showed humans working throughout the galaxy, carefully guiding the development of every major species. They were not the primitive civilization that current intelligence suggested. They were the architects of galactic civilization itself. Another hologram activated, showing a woman in military uniform standing before a star map. Emma recognized the face from historical texts, but not as a human. The records called her Supreme Commander of the Progenitor Forces, one of the most important figures in galactic history. I am General Patricia Wells, the woman said, and this may be my final log entry. The Great Withdrawal begins tomorrow. It has been decided that our children must learn to build their own future without our direct guidance. Emma sank into a nearby chair, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The progenitors were not a vanished alien race. They were humans. Humans who had seeded the galaxy with life, guided countless civilizations to spaceflight, and then voluntarily disappeared to let their fostered species grow independently. She accessed another file, this one showing construction of the Great Council Chamber on Nexus Prime. Human workers labored alongside primitive versions of species that were now advanced members of the Galactic Council. The empty chair was being carved by human craftsmen, its wood coming from Earth itself. "The chair represents our promise to return," said the human overseeing the construction. "When our children have learned to live in peace, when they have built something greater than we ever achieved, then we will ask permission to rejoin the family we helped create." Emma stood up and walked to another console, desperate to understand the full scope of what she was discovering. The files showed the true extent of human influence across the galaxy. Every major breakthrough in galactic history had been carefully orchestrated. Every species had been guided along a path designed to promote peace and cooperation rather than conquest and war. The humans had solved problems that the galaxy was still working on. They had technologies that made current galactic science look primitive. But instead of ruling over their created civilization, they had chosen to step back and watch their children grow. "Why?" Emma whispered to the empty chamber. "Why give up so much power?" As if responding to her question, another hologram activated. This time it showed an elderly human man sitting in what appeared to be a garden. Behind him, Emma could see the blue sky and green plants of Earth. "I am Dr. James Anderson, final director of the Galactic Seeding Project," the man said. "Future researchers may ask why we chose withdrawal over dominion. The answer is simple. We learned from our own mistakes." The hologram showed images of Earth's history: wars, environmental destruction, social collapse. "Humanity nearly destroyed itself many times," Dr. Anderson continued. "We were violent, selfish, and short-sighted. Only through centuries of struggle did we learn to work together, to think beyond our own immediate needs. We realized that forcing peace upon others creates resentment and rebellion. True harmony must come from within. So we decided to plant the seeds of cooperation and step back, allowing each species to choose its own path to wisdom." Emma activated more files, finding records of the human withdrawal. Entire fleets had returned to Earth. Advanced technology had been hidden or destroyed. Monitoring stations throughout the galaxy had been placed in standby mode, waiting for the day when humanity might be welcomed back. But they had not abandoned their children entirely. The files showed intervention protocols, used only when absolutely necessary to prevent galactic disasters. Pirate fleets that threatened peaceful traders were eliminated by invisible human ships. Diseases that could wipe out entire species were cured by mysterious medical supplies that appeared without explanation. Wars that might destroy promising civilizations were ended by strategic accidents that forced peace negotiations. Humanity had become the galaxy's secret guardians, protecting their fostered children while allowing them the freedom to make their own choices. Emma found the final set of files, labeled Return Protocols. They outlined the conditions under which humanity would reveal themselves and request readmission to galactic society. The primary requirement was simple but profound. The galaxy must achieve genuine peace and cooperation without human intervention. According to the files, that moment was approaching. The current Galactic Council represented the most successful period of interstellar cooperation in history. Wars between major powers had ended. Trade flowed freely. Disputes were resolved through negotiation rather than violence. Emma realized she was holding the most important discovery in galactic history. The empty chair was not waiting for primitive humans to evolve. It was waiting for advanced humans to return home to the civilization they had built and then sacrificed everything to perfect. The Great Council chamber had never been so chaotic. Emma Clark stood at the central podium, her research data floating in holographic displays around her, while 847 species shouted, argued, and demanded explanations in languages that made the translation system spark and stutter. Ambassador Marcus Thorne slammed his scaled fist against his platform so hard that cracks appeared in the metal. "You expect us to believe that we are all nothing more than pets in some human experiment?" His voice carried across the chamber despite the noise, his yellow eyes blazing with anger and wounded pride. "Not pets," Emma replied, raising her voice to be heard. "Children. There is a very important difference." "Children," scoffed Admiral James Kane, his human-like features twisted in disbelief. "My people have been spacefaring for over 2,000 years. We built great cities when your supposed human ancestors were still living in caves." Emma activated another hologram, showing the construction record she had discovered. "According to these files, your people were guided to their first spaceship designs by carefully placed artifacts. Your great discovery of faster-than-light travel came from studying ruins that humans had built and then abandoned for you to find." The chamber erupted again. Some delegates were furious, others confused, and a few sat in stunned silence as they tried to process what they were hearing. Curator Helena Blackwood watched from her elevated seat, her ancient face unreadable. Before the debate could continue, every light in the chamber suddenly dimmed. Emergency systems activated throughout Nexus Prime as energy readings spiked beyond anything the station had ever recorded. Then, one by one, holographic displays began appearing throughout the chamber, showing images from across the galaxy. Ancient structures on dead worlds were lighting up like stars. Massive installations that had been mistaken for natural rock formations were revealing themselves to be sophisticated technology. On planet after planet, dormant systems were awakening after centuries of sleep. "What is happening?" whispered the crystalline delegate from the Viridian Collective, her voice like breaking glass. Emma checked her personal scanner and felt her heart skip. "These energy signatures, they're coming from everywhere. The entire galaxy is lighting up." Then came the transmission that changed everything. A new hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, larger and clearer than any communication the Council had ever received. The figure that materialized was a middle-aged human woman with graying brown hair and kind but serious eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform with no decorations or symbols of rank. "Greetings to the Galactic Council," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence that had fallen over the chamber. "I am Ambassador Lucy Bennett, speaking on behalf of the United Earth Coalition." The chamber remained dead quiet. Even the most argumentative delegates seemed frozen in place, staring at the first human to address the galaxy in over 3 centuries. "We have watched your progress for many years," Lucy continued, "and we are pleased to say that you have exceeded all our hopes and expectations. The test is complete. You have achieved something we never thought possible, true galactic harmony built on cooperation rather than conquest." Ambassador Marcus Thorne found his voice first. "Test? What test?" "You abandoned us." Lucy's expression softened with what looked like maternal pride. "We never abandoned you. We stepped back to allow you to grow without our interference. Every species must learn to walk on their own, to make their own choices, to build their own future." She gestured, and new images appeared around her, scenes from across the galaxy showing the current state of galactic civilization. Trade routes that connected thousands of worlds. Peaceful colonies where dozens of species worked together. Scientific research stations where beings who had once been enemies now collaborated to unlock the secrets of the universe. "You have built something beautiful," Lucy said. "Something better than we ever managed during our own early history. You have proven that different species can live together in peace, that cooperation is stronger than competition, that wisdom can triumph over pride." Helena Blackwood slowly rose from her seat, her ancient voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "The monitoring, the protection, the pirates that disappeared. That was you." Lucy nodded. "We established protocols to prevent catastrophic disasters, but only when absolutely necessary. The vast majority of your achievements are entirely your own. You earned this peace. You built this civilization. You chose cooperation over conquest." "But why?" asked Admiral Kane, his anger replaced by confusion. "Why give up control of the galaxy? Why hide for so long?" "Because ruling through force creates resentment," Lucy explained. "Because being given something is not the same as earning it. Because children who are never allowed to make their own mistakes never truly learn to make good decisions." She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled delegates. "We made many mistakes in our own past. We fought wars that nearly destroyed our world. We were selfish and short-sighted. Only through great struggle did we learn the value of peace and cooperation. We realized that if we wanted to create a truly peaceful galaxy, we could not do it by conquest or control. We had to plant the seeds of cooperation and step back, allowing each species to choose its own path to wisdom." The transmission began to shift, showing images of Earth itself, not the primitive world that galactic intelligence suggested, but a gleaming jewel of advanced civilization. Cities that floated among the clouds. Oceans that sparkled with underwater research stations. A moon that had been transformed into a vast garden where humans lived in harmony with nature. "We formally request permission to rejoin the galactic community," Lucy said. "Not as your creators or your guides but as your equals. We hope that you will welcome us back into the family we helped to build, but which has grown far beyond anything we could have imagined." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Curator Helena Blackwood began to clap. The sound echoed through the vast space, and one by one, other delegates joined her until the entire chamber thundered with applause. The test was indeed complete, and humanity was coming home. 3 months had passed since the galaxy learned the truth about humanity, and today the Great Council chamber buzzed with an energy unlike anything in its long history. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy had traveled to Nexus Prime, not for a regular session, but to witness something that had been centuries in the making. The massive crystalline dome overhead sparkled with the light of distant stars, but all eyes in the chamber were focused on the central aisle. At the end of that aisle sat the chair that had waited empty for 300 years, its dark wood gleaming under the chamber's lights. Ambassador Lucy Bennett walked slowly down the center path, her simple blue diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by delegates from across the galaxy. She appeared to be in her 50s, with silver streaks in her brown hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of both wisdom and kindness. There was nothing particularly impressive about her appearance, nothing that marked her as special except for the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. As she passed each row of delegates, something remarkable happened. Without any signal or coordination, beings began to rise from their seats. First the reptilian Zephyrians, then the crystalline Viridians, followed by the gas-dwelling Nebulans in their containment suits. Row after row, species after species, until the entire chamber stood in respectful silence. Lucy paused halfway down the aisle, clearly moved by the gesture. She nodded to the delegates on either side, her expression showing humble gratitude rather than pride. When she resumed walking, her steps seemed even more deliberate, as if she understood the weight of the moment. Marcus Thorne, the Zephyrian ambassador who had argued so strongly for removing the empty chair, watched her approach with eyes that held no trace of his former anger. In the months since Emma Clark's revelation, he had spent countless hours studying the historical records, learning how his own species had been guided and protected by the humans they had dismissed as primitive. When Lucy finally reached the chair, she stopped and placed her hands on its carved armrests. The wood was warm under her touch, as if it had been waiting patiently for this moment. She looked up at the assembled delegates, her gaze taking in the incredible diversity of life that filled the chamber. "My fellow beings," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space without amplification. The chamber's acoustics had been designed by human engineers centuries ago to ensure that every word spoken from this position would be heard by all. "We return to you today not as conquerors or rulers, but as family coming home after a long journey. You have built something here that is far more beautiful than we ever dreamed possible when we first planted the seeds of galactic civilization." She gestured around the chamber, taking in the sight of hundreds of different species sitting peacefully together. "When we first began the great seeding, we hoped that the various species of the galaxy might eventually learn to coexist. We never imagined that you would create true harmony, that former enemies would become close allies, that different forms of life could work together so perfectly." Admiral James Kane, whose own species bore a striking resemblance to humans despite evolving independently, leaned forward in his seat. The anger and wounded pride he had shown months earlier had been replaced by curiosity and respect. "You were teachers once," Lucy continued, "and we learned much from watching you learn. But now we come as students, hoping to discover what you have found that we had lost during our long isolation." She turned to look directly at Helena Blackwood, the ancient curator whose wisdom had preserved the truth for so long. "We have advanced technologies to share, knowledge that may help solve problems you still face. But more importantly, we hope to learn from your example how to build something even greater than the sum of its parts." The chamber remained perfectly silent, thousands of beings hanging on every word. Lucy sat down slowly in the chair that had waited for her for 3 centuries, but she did not sit like a ruler claiming a throne. Instead, she sat like a parent joining her children at the dinner table, equal among equals. "The chair was never empty," she said with a gentle smile that seemed to encompass every face before her. "It was simply waiting for the right moment. Not the moment when you needed us to guide you, but the moment when you no longer needed guidance at all. The moment when you could welcome us back not as your creators, but as your partners in building an even better future." Emma Clark, watching from the research section, felt tears running down her cheeks. Her discovery had changed everything, but seeing the peaceful resolution filled her with a joy she had not expected. "We have much work to do together," Lucy continued. "There are still regions of the galaxy where conflict exists, still species that have not yet joined our community of peace. There are scientific mysteries to solve, new worlds to explore, and always the challenge of maintaining the harmony you have worked so hard to create." She stood up again, looking around the chamber one final time. "But we will face these challenges together as we should have from the beginning. No more watchers from the shadows. No more secret interventions. From this day forward, we walk the same path, toward a future we will build with our combined wisdom and strength." The applause that followed shook the very foundations of Nexus Prime. It was not just the sound of approval but of recognition, of family reunited, of a long journey finally completed. The thunder of it echoed through the chamber and beyond, carried by broadcast signals to every corner of the galaxy. When the noise finally died down, Lucy sat back in her chair and smiled. "Now then," she said in a voice that was both businesslike and warm, "I believe we have some important matters to discuss. The galaxy will not govern itself." For the first time in 3 centuries, the chair at the center of the Galactic Council was no longer empty. The family was complete at last.